Guys, this holiday season, how about giving your wife or girlfriend something totally different? Something romantic that celebrates the unique connection between you and her. I'm talking about a luxury gift service called Enclosed that delivers designer lingerie to your lady month after month. Enclosed is like a flower of the month or a beer of the month, but instead of flowers she gets surprised with ultra high-end lingerie. And this is seriously high-end stuff, the kind of quality that will really impress your lady. Enclosed was designed specifically to help guys find gifts for their wives. Enclosed is all about helping you make her happy, and Enclosed is effortless for you. Every month Enclosed sends your wife or girlfriend a custom curated lingerie gift selected just for your lady, and they back the gift up with a 100% size guarantee, so you never have to worry about fit. You can join more than 30,000 couples that love Enclosed, and I'll give you a little gift. Right now you can get $35 off your Enclosed gift. Just go to enclosedlingerie.com, enter the code MANU at checkout to get $35 off any Enclosed multi-month gift. Why not give your wife something that really reflects and deepens the connection between the two of you? Something that you would never give your mother. That's enclosedlingerie.com with the code MANU for $35 off the best gift ever.
Well done, Bobby Charlton. Well done, Manchester United.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has done it! Bobby Charlton saved it! United again! Renee! A magnificent goal by Robin van Persie!
Good evening and welcome to United Hour, your official Red Cafe podcast for all things Manchester United. I'm Ed, and tonight I've got
Alex
and Ashwin.
Whee.
Hello.
Hello.
It's been a while, Alex.
Party.
Yeah.
Like two episodes maybe, not too long, but
Well, I don't think I've been on one with you for a while. So.
Oh, okay, maybe, not sure. Yes, it's been a while. How are you? Because I am very well this week.
Are you?
Yes.
Did something happen?
And just before we get into the pleasantries and celebrations and whatnot, most of you will have just either heard or skipped through Ed's ad. We just want to say we will be also adding a Just Giving page. So if you guys could get on that, all proceeds will be going to the Lowry Hotel, whose forecast for 2019 has just plummeted and dropped off a cliff. So, you know, we're trying to do our bit for Manchester and helping out there. So please do, make your donations.
Oh, absolutely.
And contribute where you can.
It's a time for giving, guys. A time for giving.
It's, a staple. It'll be forever in the history of the club. Like in 50 years' time, there'll be articles on, United and Jose Mourinho and where it all went wrong, and they'll mention his stay at the Lowry Hotel.
Spoilers.
It'll be infamous. Well, I mean, I can't see the future. This is just guesswork.
Well, we've not even announced it though. He's the axe has officially fallen. He's gone.
It's gone. He's gone.
So, what do we reckon? How's it come to that?
I have no idea. I am shocked.
No idea.
Dreadful football. Dreadful football. Dreadful transfers.
But he won the treble.
He did win the treble. Yes, very true. I completely forgot about that. He also won the Champions League with Porto 15 years ago, if that's of any relevance, because he would have you believe that it is.
And he won with Inter too, which he also reminded us of this year.
Indeed. If only someone had told me that. It's obviously been it's both been a long time coming, but also in quite a weird moment. I think it's caught a lot of us by surprise somewhat. In 2 months ago, we were sat here thinking, is he going to be sacked tomorrow? And then I think we'd all moved past that, and we felt like we'd got through the worst, and he was on some sort of steady path. So the timing is somewhat surprising, and maybe it's worth. I'm not sure what your guys' thoughts on why now. Obviously 11 points behind top four, 19 points off Liverpool, is it? A goal difference of 30 or whatever it is. We're back in the minus. We've conceded more goals this season than last season. The stats are terrible, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's changed and what happened against Liverpool.
Contracts.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it might be related to the stalled contract negotiations, possibly. But, as you were saying that, Alex, I was reminded of the... I can't remember which journalist it was, but they said after the Newcastle game he was going to be sacked come what may. And perhaps because of that leak, that's also maybe a reason they sort of stayed the execution for a while, so it was done properly.
Well, I think a few things happened. I think after Newcastle, didn't we play away to Chelsea? And then we drew that. That was actually, to some extent, we were unlucky to not come out with all 3 points. But he had a little string of results there for a while. We won at Juventus. But, again, as soon as the results started going against him, a lot of the same kind of morose, negative... Almost, it's very denigrating the way he was talking about the club. Not even the club, forget the club, but the actual players in his squad. It was just very denigrating and very derogatory.
Yes, but is that new?
No, it's not.
I mean,
new,
he was doing that last season as well, and obviously last season he was more successful than this season, and maybe that allows for some more forgiveness there, because you can say that his methods to some degree are working, and we could probably have a further discussion on that, but I don't think that it's new, and I think it's something that he has been doing all this season. Maybe, I guess we've now got to a point where we have played all the top teams, and I think we're bottom of the the Big Six league or whatever, and it's hard for us to really know. Just before we came on air, we were sort of comparing and contrasting to the Van Gaal era. He obviously in his last season did very, very well against the top teams. It's hard to know how much stock those games would take. I think a lot of people would actually consider that maybe they wouldn't take that much stock, but for the decision to be made after
when the golf in class,
exactly, yeah, and for it to be such a, what they had 36 shots. I think their second most this season is something like 22, and it's the most shots we've conceded on our goal for 14 years. And for me, Liverpool didn't really even get into third gear. They didn't have to be that good to yet completely outclass us. So, I can understand. To me, it was an incredibly frustrating game, but at the same time, it's still a strange one.
To me, those two results that week were both of them were fireable offenses, because, okay, the Valencia match was a dead rubber, and I don't even mind that we lost that, because I think it's very easy now to sit here and say, well, he should have played a full strength side, because there's always a chance Juventus could have lost, whatever. I don't care about that. My thing is he presented that match as, I'm going to give all these players that haven't been playing chances, and I want them to show me, what they can do when I do give them a chance. And if you just looked at that squad and then watched the first 5-10 minutes of that match, you knew that it was impossible. It was impossible for anybody in that starting 11 to come out of that match with any credit to their name, because the entire collection of players and skill sets, and it made no sense. There was no formation you could play where anybody was going to look good. And I think it's I was critical of Pogba even after that match, because he wasn't running. He was not. But I can't at the same time, I can't begrudge him that, because even if as a player you would know within the first. I mean, they probably knew when they saw the team sheet, but within the first 5 minutes of the match, you know that this team makes no sense, and they're all playing in the same. It was Pereira, Fred, Pogba, Mata, I think, and then there was another one. I don't remember who the other midfielder he picked was, whatever it was, but they're all these 5 guys playing in the same 20-yard area. That's no way that's gonna work. And so okay, that's one, and then to go to Liverpool and forget in the first half. Okay, yeah, we were clearly not as good as them, but I could at least kind of see what we were trying to do, and I understood it. And then at halftime, he took off Dalot, which is reasonable, I guess, if you are worried that he's just getting exposed. But then his adjustment is to put in Fellaini, and then Robertson just had the entire wing to himself because it seemed like Darmian was still playing extremely centrally, and I don't get that at all, and I don't think it's actually, to me, it's sad watching these latter years of Mourinho, because I remember him when he was first coming up, and he was like the opposite, where his in-match decision making and substitutions, that was what his bread and butter. That was one of his biggest strengths as a manager, and not just that, but also coming into these big matches with a solid game plan. And yeah, it might have been boring, but at least his teams were well drilled and they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what the purpose of their tactics were. And you watch these later years of him, and it just seems that whatever it was that he either just stopped adjusting to the, anything, football continues to evolve and it's never going, for a while, tiki-taka was the big thing. And even Pep, look at how his City team plays now versus how that Barcelona team played then, and it's different. It's completely different. And it just seems like with Mourinho, he got to this peak with Inter, and you could even say that Madrid team to overthrow Barcelona was something special. But it's at that point, I feel like he thought that he had achieved everything and that his tactics were here to stay, and he just never really seemed to move on from that. And I know he won the Premier League in England before that, or after that, but I think anybody would say that was a little bit weaker of a league than the current league, and the manager talent is clearly weaker than it's clearly much better now than it was then.
Yeah, sure. Well, Leicester won the season after, right? So, I mean, that shows as much as it was a special achievement. It was a perfect storm of circumstances for Leicester, and I think once Ferguson left, that was sort of the start of the road or the path to make that possible for Leicester, and in the season Mourinho won, I'd definitely say that's the case. I think it was a good point around the sort of loss and ability of Mourinho's to change things mid-game. Obviously, we've seen some comebacks this season, but I think Imran alluded to the fact that actually the comebacks that we've had have typically been where Mourinho hasn't been able to interfere, between the first and the second and the third goal. There was that game versus, was it Southampton, where we did get the goals back. We were equalising at half time, and then we finished the game and stayed at 2-2. In the other games where we started on that comeback trail, we continued with the wings in our sail, and we then went on to win the match. And maybe there's something in that, maybe there's not, but for him to surrender the flanks to Liverpool, like you say, with Robertson just completely owning that left-hand side, I do think that there's something, I don't know if symbolic's the right word, but there's something in that for your United team to be doing that. Just doesn't seem right to me. Not against Liverpool in particular.
Well, not if there's no clear counter-attacking plan, right? Because I remember watching, the last Champions League tie that Ferguson had against Madrid, and we were very defensive, but we always posed a threat on the counter. There was always a threat on the counter, and with Mourinho for 3 years, we've kind of been that was always his biggest strength. He even talked about it recently in a post match where he was saying that this team is not his. It's not a team that he identifies with or is representative of him. And he went on to list how his Chelsea teams were very great at counterattacking. At Inter Milan, they were very good in a low block, and at Madrid, they were amazing in transitions and counterattacks. And it's that's great. But what has happened now for 3 years? We've been waiting. I've been waiting at least to see this Mourinho counterattacking side, and I cannot remember one match where you would say even the one against Chelsea his first year when we completely dominated them at Old Trafford. I didn't think that was some amazing counterattacking performance. I thought there was one good counterattack from Herrera, which was just one pass. It wasn't it wasn't a move. It was just one pass.
It was more energetic pressing at the front from Lingard and Rashford, right? I think, but
and I don't know. It's just very bizarre to me to see how I just don't get it. I can't believe that all of it is that the board was challenging him on reshaping the squad and transfers, but maybe that played a part in it. But it's not you can't look at the squad that he's had over the 3 years and tell me that he could not have drilled a good counter-attacking side out of what he has at his disposal. I refuse to believe that.
I mean, if you look at the team he selects, let's be fair, right? All of the players may not be his first choice, but then within those players, there are players he definitely trusts. You've got Fellaini, you've got Matic, you've got Lukaku, Sanchez for a while. These are all players that Mourinho was more than happy to keep. You know, Mourinho made such a big deal about keeping Fellaini on in the transfer window. You know, there's I don't think he has an argument that this isn't his team. I think they are his players, and I think...
And he bought by it. He took credit for
exactly.
that. He took credit for that. He took credit for Dalot. He couldn't stop talking about Fred during preseason, about how he was going to use him to progress, and he needed Brazilians in the side. So, like, the majority of the signings, I cannot believe the board forced them down his throat. I just don't see that at all.
No. And sort of back to your point about the team and the way the players were sort of set up to fail against Valencia. I think Alex mentioned last season that that's basically what Mourinho was doing with Rashford last season.
And Martial, I remember.
And Martial. He'd leave them out for games and games and then suddenly throw them in, and then when they don't perform, don't hit the ground running, he says, well, this is why I can't play them. And you know, it just sort of, not only is it not their confidence, but it just sets them up to fail, and they're never going to progress from there.
Well, what is the point of even saying that? Like, the only point in saying that is to show people that you're right. And, like, okay, I mean, I guess that's fine if you're the manager of a club with all these players who you have to kind of, you know, to some extent. And this is like, that's what's so crazy about what he has become. Is I remember, like, when he was first at Chelsea, all those players would run through a wall for him. Even when he left, I don't think, if I remember correctly, he didn't leave because he had issues with the playing squad. He left because he had issues with Abramovich controlling transfers.
It was a bit of both.
There was some tension with him and John Terry and the likes, but maybe that was a monster that he himself had created. And let's be honest, he's done that at every club towards the end. He's ended up having bust-ups with Casillas and Ronaldo. Other than Inter.
Inter he left, right? So he left.
Inter was slightly different. Hazard at Chelsea, if you remember, there was these banners from the Chelsea fans calling him rat and whatnot. This season, particularly with Pogba, you know, for me, a problem for the most part, he has created not completely in fiction, but you know, somewhat in fiction, and the rest, I feel like, you know, where he's probably got a point. I feel like he's played a large role in making that happen and turning the relationship into what it is now. And I think, as we've mentioned so many times this season, and something that Nick constantly bangs on about is, but at those other clubs he'd won something. He'd won something in his second season. He'd won the league, and therefore he could still go out on a high. And I think Nick's made the point that his ego will really struggle, that he's failed at United. But for me, I've come to the point, you know, particularly with what he's been saying in the last few weeks, and this is why I have very little sympathy for him. And, you know, dancing on a manager who's just been sacked grey sort of thing isn't something that I'd typically like to do. But he's if anything, his ego is so unpenetrable that I expect that he will leave this job with his 24 million in hand, of course, but he will be completely solely convinced that he has done the best that he could have done in the circumstances, that the problems are beyond his control. And you know, obviously I have some sympathy that there are circumstances and issues beyond his control, but there's definitely still a lot of blame to be laid at his door. And his ego won't be at all broken. I think he will be telling himself that, you know, he did everything he could, and that, you know, all the problems were with the club and with Woodward and with the hierarchy and the structure and the expectations from the fans and everything that goes with that.
And I just don't. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's not. I don't think any of us are going to totally buy that. But it's like, he knew the job when he came in. I mean, like, he knew what it was. It's not like a mystery that United was not set up like a lot of other top European clubs, right? It was very much the manager controls transfers, has a big say over transfers. And to be completely honest, for somebody of his ego, I can 100% guarantee that was one of the major appeals of the job to him, was that, okay, finally I have... Because, you know, his bitching and moaning about transfers did not start until Woodward basically said, I'm not going to buy Perisic. And then it became like this big crisis that he wouldn't buy Perisic. Which, okay, I mean, I guess like, you have to have other options on the table, right? It can't just be get me Ivan Perisic. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to get you Perisic. Well, I need Perisic. Like, you're trying to tell me that in all of the world, with hundreds and thousands of footballers everywhere, you cannot find one player with similar qualities. Like, this isn't Messi. Like, he's
Yeah.
not telling him to buy some, like, singular, unique, world-class talent. He's telling him to buy a hard-working winger who can put in crosses. That's not like, if you can't identify a better option or a different option, then that's your that's your fault. And he can say that the scouts aren't good enough, and I would agree with him. That is likely a problem, though we don't know for sure. But that is likely a problem, that the scouting network isn't set up well enough or isn't structured well enough. And I can agree with all that. But he knew the job when he came in, and he knew what that entailed, that entails that he has to do a large part of scouting, or at least read what the scouts are saying and look into it further as far as he's concerned. And when he is failing at that, like, I'm sorry, that's the job you're brought in to do. And now we know hopefully we know after Moyes, after Van Gaal, after Mourinho, that just let it, like, these guys aren't Ferguson. The world has moved on. And
Ashwin, just take a deep breath. I just want to let you know, I'm not sure if anybody's told you, but he has actually gone now. You can calm down and let go of all that anger and that intensity.
In light of that,
fine. Relax.
Let me crowbar in some stats for you, I guess, kind of stats statements. So this season is the worst points at this stage for a Manchester United team since 1990 to 1991. Now, to put that into context, that's before the Premier League started in 1992-1993. So that's pretty bad. But then, in addition to that,
sure,
since Mourinho's appointment, the points achieved have been 222 by City, 202 by Spurs, 200 by Chelsea, 196 by Liverpool, and 176 by Manchester United. So, that's basically everyone in the league currently ahead of us.
Since he came in?
That's
interesting.
Since Mourinho was appointed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the first season, obviously, there was a point where he got to where he basically, I mean, he hadn't done good enough in the first season in terms of points. We drew far too many games, but in fairness, it got to that point where he said, right, we're going to go for the Europa because that's our best chance of getting in the Champions League, and that's what's important. And I think we all accepted that so long as he did get that right, and he did get us in the Champions League, which he did. And then we can't really complain about his points total last year, right? And
no.
Obviously this year is where the wheels have completely dropped off. I think there were signs, and maybe if we pick the key reasons why we think it all went wrong for Mourinho at United, then we'll be talking about things that probably happened and were in place last season, which I think really set the tone for this season.
But I think, bear in mind though, sorry, is it Unai Emery? He came into Arsenal and he's ahead of us in the league.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not making excuses.
I wouldn't say that Arsenal's team needed as much of a revamp as ours. I think Wenger left it in a pretty decent shape, but Mourinho is supposedly the best, if not the second best manager in the world, which I suppose also brings me on to my next question. Is his time over as an elite manager?
No,
I
don't think so. I do think that his stock isn't what it was, and I don't think it will ever be what it will, because I do think that, as Ashwin was saying earlier, I think that he hasn't progressed in the way that he should, where Guardiola's playing a different style than he was with Barcelona.
Yeah.
His ego, Mourinho's ego, hasn't allowed him to learn and to adapt with football. And I mean, United are the only top-tier elite club now that aren't playing a pressing game, right? And aren't able to. It's not that we're not. It's that we aren't able to either when we need to.
Would you put Atletico there? I guess, but they're the only other team I think I can think of.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And I guess Atletico, though, still don't have that expectation. I think the plus on top of that is that there's an expectation and assumption that United's default is to attack. And I think for a club like Atletico, who maybe, obviously they have a rich history, but not what United's is in terms of dominating games and whatnot. There isn't that expectation. It was the same when Mourinho was at Chelsea. Even though Chelsea are a big team, there's still that allowance and that sympathy for a more pragmatic game that's about winning. And that never really fit at United the same way that it wasn't able to fit at Real Madrid. And at Real Madrid, he had the tools that he could combat that, and here he doesn't and hasn't. And that's partly his fault, partly the fault of the hierarchical structure.
I think there's more sympathy to it too. If you're actually good at defending, then okay, but we were awful this year, and even last year I didn't think we were that good. It was just
I think that's down to him.
No, and I agree.
Well, I don't know that it's. I don't know. I still think that Mourinho, like the reason why I say he's not done it as a top level manager is because there will always be demand for him. I wouldn't be surprised if Madrid end up with him back there, despite what happened a few years ago. PSG, I don't think will take him anymore. I think they're past that now, but maybe they will one day. But I just think that City and PSG are basically puff PR pieces for the Middle East, and it would be a huge gamble to take Mourinho, who, as we've seen with United, is just the complete opposite of that. He is not what you want in terms of protecting the reputation of a club and getting the fans behind them and all that sort of stuff. That's not what he's there to do. He's there to cause conflict and use that as a means to an end to get results. But I still think there will be an appetite there, and I still think that if he was to go to a team and he had a strong defence both individually and as a collective, and he was in a league where the team would maybe more naturally dominate in one that's not so as competitive at the top as United as the Premier League as this season, then he could still win, because last season he could have won that league. In previous seasons that would have been enough to win the league, and I don't think we should give him too much credit for that, because people like Rafa Benitez were in a similar situation, and I give him almost zero credit, and I give Liverpool zero credit for being close but not quite getting there. But my point is that if he can do that with United last season, there's no reason. If he was at Juventus one day, if he was at Bayern Munich, I don't know if they'd take him, but if he was at an Atletico, if he had players like Chiellini and Bonucci or something like that, then he would be able to get something out of his old, somewhat outdated tactics. I still think that there is something in that. It's strange that at United we were in a position where he was trying to deploy that, and yet we were playing games with often a backline that was there when Fergie was here, and with two of the players in that backline when Fergie was there who were wingers and are now getting onto their mid-30s. It makes it makes absolutely no sense. So I don't think he's done at the top level. I am interested to see where he goes. I still think that there's a very strong chance that we could see him at Wolves at some point in the near future, which I think would be really interesting. I think it's Mendes, it's his agent, as obviously wields a lot of power at that club at the moment. They would back him financially. The expectation and pressure wouldn't be there. And he would be therefore allowed, and there'd be complete forgiveness for him play as pragmatic and as negative as he wanted. So yeah, I actually think that I don't know whether his ego would take it, but I think that's one to watch for. That's one to put your money on, people.
I genuinely, sincerely hope he isn't. I suppose I'm just disappointed with it all, because I was very much for Mourinho coming to United. I thought, he's ready to settle down. He wants to create a sort of legend for himself, a proper legend for himself, more than just a very successful journeyman. And I've got a friend who's a big Chelsea fan, and he said to me from the start, he's not going to last more than 3 seasons. He can't keep, relationships positive with players. He will be gone by the end of the 3rd season. And if he isn't sacked, he will leave because he's done as much as he wants to do. And I suppose ultimately he's been proved right, unfortunately. But
yes or no, go ahead, sorry.
I don't like Mourinho when he's the opposition manager, shall we say. So I prefer...
We needed him, right?
Yeah.
Klopp was at Liverpool. City had just got Guardiola. And we were at a point where I think most of us were feeling that United needed to win something. We were on that slippery slope. We didn't want it to become a mentality of United's where we could go years without winning something in the way that Liverpool and Arsenal have done. And I personally was just at a point where I said, look, we need to prioritize winning something. And the obvious candidate and the obvious choice for that was someone who had, in the last 12 months, won a Premier League.
Yeah.
And they'd won it 3 times previous, and they'd won leagues in other countries and other competition, and a name to pull players, because at that point in time we were limping, and there weren't a great deal of candidates. So I think I don't blame the board for choosing him, and I think what's ended up happening this season isn't actually that much of a surprise to many people. You know, a lot of people were predicting a third season meltdown. It's just like we said, in every other club he'd won in his second year. You know, and the reason that he didn't this time was because of Guardiola and the amazing, incredible job that he's done at City. So I don't think he was the wrong choice. I just think that he's made a lot of bad decisions, and I guess I think maybe that's so we can move on to moving forward and looking ahead. Maybe we just need to nail down what those reasons are, and I think we've spoke about the defense. I agree with you, Ashwin, that last season De Gea maybe covered for some poor defending. We were one of the best defensive teams in the league, but if you were to look at expected goals conceded,
It was something crazy.
we should have conceded a lot more, and De Gea obviously had an incredible season. I do think that there's something to be said around his lack of updating in tactics and not being able to adopt any sort of pressing game. I think transfers is probably the biggest one, right? For all of us. Did he get the players he wanted, yes or no? But for me, even if he did, it's just clear to me that the players he was signing weren't with a overall system and a collective in mind. They weren't about qualities and characteristics of the player and where they're going to fit. They were about a name on a team sheet. And I don't think you can get away with that anymore.
I thought he did sign. I actually, in some way, I think he did sign players for their characteristics, but he didn't actually have a. There was no thought of like, okay, so he said, right? Oh, I wanted to bring Fred in, and I wanted to bring Pereira back because they have these technical qualities in midfield and they like to play in tight spaces. Like, he said that. He specifically said that. So I think he totally got what the side needed at points, but he didn't actually have a coherent way of. It was like, okay, well, I want Fred, but I have to play Pogba, and I will always play Matic because he is my son. So like, how can I make this? But Fred doesn't work, so now I have to take him out, and it's his fault. And it's like there was no even thought to him that Matic might be the problem. Like, that is where I really don't. For somebody as meticulous, as much as a perfectionist, as someone that's so ready to blame players, it is mind-boggling.
But do you think he really believes that? Do you, like, for me, it is someone who is on the defensive, he is in the trenches, and he is accusing players of not giving him their role, of not breaking through walls for them, as you mentioned earlier, something that maybe players used to do for him years ago. So he was digging in deep, and he was playing the players who he trusted, the players who he had that connection with, the players who he felt would go out on the pitch and give it their all, even if their all wasn't good enough. And ultimately, I think he's part of the reason why Matic has been ran into the ground, because he brought him back from injury early twice. He played him at every opportunity and has never given him a rest, and he's thrown him into important positions in completely different systems, completely different formations, with different partners in twos and threes, in diamonds, and I don't think he's helped Matic out, but I just think it's a case of him digging in deep and playing the players he trusts, and he wants them to give him their all. So he's saying to them, well, look, I'm going to trust you, and even though you're not in the best form at the moment, I'm not going to drop you, and I expect something in return for that. And ultimately with Matic, he's never really got it, but maybe that would have come in time, or maybe it was just too late. I think we saw similar with Ivanovic in his last season at Chelsea.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of like my point, though, is if you're buying players for certain reasons, but then you also are unwilling. Like, okay, if you're saying that we need to be more technical and play faster through midfield, please explain how Nemanja Matic fits into that long-term vision. I can understand that you want to have him in there at the beginning of the season. I mean, I think people exaggerate how bad he was in the second half of last season a bit. I thought he was great in the first half of the season. So I get why you give him a chance, right, at the start of the season to, play either you make that position your own or you lose the position. I get that, but to just like after the second game of the season to basically not give Fred or literally not give Pereira chances after that is kind of crazy to me. And also, he never played. He only played Herrera in that defensive midfield as the defensive midfielder, which was all Herrera did his first year for us. Like under his first year under Mourinho, I mean, once Matic came in, he never got a chance to play in that position again. Even though he probably had his best season at United in that position. So yeah. I just find his whole just the entire management of the squad, and I'm just talking about midfield here because that to me is where I've completely lost it or just didn't get what he was trying to go for. But I mean, you can look at the left wing with Sanchez and Martial. You can look at left back last year with Young and Shaw never really getting a chance for right. Like there's just so many of these issues, and I think it's like over a period of time, especially when the squad doesn't rotate over, like when the board isn't selling a lot of these players because they still believe in them. It's as a manager, if you are not giving them chances, it's too much to overcome.
Pereira is such a good point because I think that's one that doesn't really get mentioned and people probably don't really see it, but it should really highlight to United fans, one of the key reasons why maybe he wasn't and clearly isn't right for our club, in that we've got this youth academy product who's clearly very talented, who last season went out on loan because he wanted to prove himself, and he went to a decent club in Valencia and was in was at another prime league, and he had something about him to go and do that, and Mourinho didn't want him to. And if you remember, Mourinho was complaining that he was like, well, he should be here fighting for his chance, fighting for his spot. I'm disappointed that he's on loan because he should be here. And then this season he's here and he's not playing him, and he gave him very little chance at the start of the season and then completely dropped him and hasn't given him another look in, and that's incredibly disappointing considering what he was saying last season, but also in reaction. But I think we're probably getting into the weeds a little bit too much here, because we could go on about these individual things for ages. And I think that's probably one of his biggest downfalls, right? Is these interpersonal conflicts that he's had with players and these misunderstandings, I guess you could call them. Pogba probably being the most notable one, and an instance where the player has won out and seen the manager, which in all honesty these days, whether it should or shouldn't, is often the case, right?
The manager just chooses the teams these days.
But I mean, hasn't that always been the case? Like I think for United fans it's a little bit different because Ferguson was there for so long, so it skews the perception of what is normal and not. But wouldn't you say for most clubs that players have had power for a long time, and for most of the time, like, I mean, even as an American and others, like as a fan of the NBA and the NFL and like, these are sports where a coach can be as great as it is, but once you lose, I think in any sport, once you lose the players, it is always going to be easier for management to get rid of the coach or get rid of the manager than to get rid of 13 players from a football squad or 10 players from an NBA roster. It's so much
lost
easier.
The player. Do we know that he'd lost? Like, it's one of those weird things where I still think there are some players who, there's quite a good chunk of players that I don't think he had necessarily lost, who were still giving all the problem. I actually think is that there's been, in fact, and this is the reason why I'm so glad that Mourinho is out and that we've woken up to what he was doing, because there has been a systematic reduction in two things. One is the confidence that the players have in their own ability to play football and the level of football that they are at and the level of player that they are, because in these big games they're playing as if they were a massive underdog, and when they get the ball they don't know what to do with it. They don't feel like they have the confidence in their own instinct to and have any conviction in what they're doing. And then also the reduction in expectation from the fans. I know me and you, Ed, in particular, are often moaning in the WhatsApp chat, and maybe we've been less likely to go beyond to watch a game live this season. And Nick Top Red Nick would of course comment that that's being a spoiled fan, but I think actually it's not whether being spoiled is right or wrong, but I think you do need that spoiled attitude and that arrogance and not entitlement. There has to be hard work behind it, but there needs to be that expectation that actually Manchester United are the biggest, or one of the two biggest, maybe you could argue, clubs in the world, and that we should be expected to be challenging every season. We should be expecting to be going deep in the Champions League. We should expect to have the best players, and we should expect to be dominating and dictating the game in most matches. We shouldn't be the underdogs on the back foot who are accepting of sixth in the league and of a Mickey Mouse treble here and there. I don't like the reason why Ronaldo and Messi are so good is that they push themselves and that they're arrogant. They know they are, but they keep pushing for more. And there's been this systematic reduction from a player's perspective in their ability. They're still working hard, but they clearly have no confidence and conviction in what they're doing. And then from the fans, and maybe even the board at times, that we've been accepting and allowing him to do this and get away with it. And I think they're the two biggest reasons why I'm so pleased that Mourinho's gone, because we were on a very, very dangerous slippery slope, and we have been since Fergie joined. And I think Mourinho has escalated that slippery slope, and I think getting rid of him is us catching a rock. And we've got to build from here, and it's going to be a long path back to success, but having him gone definitely gives us some sort of placeholder or foothold, or maybe even a blank page that we can work from and take stock in.
I think so. Well, I think we'll thank Mourinho for his treble, and we will move on. So, Ole, 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 Ole.
Who?
Are we happy?
Who?
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
I never heard of him, mate.
Never.
Who's that?
He's just this young Norwegian lad. He
Okay.
Signed on a bargain,
Right.
Quite a good striker. Got a good eye for
Who'd
goal. Yeah.
Who'd he play for?
Oh, I can't remember now.
Did he do anything meaningful in his time wherever he played?
Not really.
No goals in finals or anything like that. No.
Oh well,
no.
I mean, he will do in the future. When he plays for us.
Right. It's player manager. Are you saying now?
Oh well, yeah.
Completely
like
lost
that.
me here.
Would you like that?
I mean, it was no. I mean, I do know him, but it was only a tap in right in '99. Let's be honest.
Yeah, well,
overrated.
I've missed those.
You've missed tap-ins, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd have found the crossbar in that situation,
Yeah, talk us through. So, what's the situation? So, Mourinho's gone.
Mourinho's gone.
And you've just said Ole. What's going on?
So we've got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in as our caretaker manager, with Mike Phelan, the man himself, the shorts, in as his assistant.
That's what. When you said shorts are back on the WhatsApp chat,
yes,
I had no idea what you're talking about. Okay, cool, got you.
Sorry. The shorts will be on the touchline. The balloons will be bursting.
Yes, balloons. The balloons, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I'm sure most of our listeners have, but do YouTube Ferguson balloon, and it's a fantastic moment, which will endear you to Mike Phelan forevermore.
I'll be honest.
The balloon.
If you have to watch one clip this week, and it's between Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's goal against Bayern Munich and the Champions League final in '99, or Mike Phelan popping a balloon and Fergie absolutely shitting himself, make sure it's the latter.
Yes, absolutely. There's a school of thought that he was actually the driving force behind Fergie's latter years' success. So,
Okay, interesting.
I can't say I'm necessarily part of that school of thought,
Sure.
but I am glad to have him back though, simply because it is sort of a return to not necessarily the Fergie years, but it's a return to a mentality that I think has been sorely missed since Fergie's retirement.
Hmm. I think for me, it's very, very clear that Ferguson and, well, definitely Ferguson, maybe Bobby Charlton. Clearly, in the last few years, they're what, non-executive directors. They're on the board,
Yeah,
but they don't have any voting power.
no,
We've never really been sure on what say they've had and what control, what influence they've had on the club. And we know that Fergie's always had this legacy in mind of his that would involve United players and his ex-players, particularly, players like Giggs taking over and success being born from within. Um, and to me, it's just quite clear that with the signing of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, they've had a say in that. I don't, I'm sure that, Woodward's probably considered that Ole would be a good way to maybe help get the fans on his side, because Mourinho has played a bit of a blinder and a game of creating a conflict between him and Woodward that has had fans fairly in lots of ways, don't get me wrong, place a lot of blame at Woodward's door, and I don't think that's a problem. And maybe, Woodward's taken that into account and he said, right, we need to get someone who's going to get the fans aligned and on side and behind us and to remove that tension. But also I expect that Ferguson's had some say in this. And as a caretaker role, like I think it's a fantastic choice because let's be honest, we're 11 points behind. There's no expectation that we're going
no.
to get top four now. If it happens, fantastic. It's a bonus. I'm not saying that it's unachievable, but there can be no expectation that it's there. We're beyond that now, and
It's just a free hit.
just yeah, exactly. It's a free hit. There's no risk. Let's be honest, if he doesn't do great, the fans will still back him. He will. I would expect to play some sort of attacking football. The players will have the cloud of Mourinho, the dark cloud of Mourinho lifted. But ultimately, if they were to finish eighth or ninth, then United fans would just be saying, "Oh well, at least we're not in Europa League." And he would continue as a club legend. It's kind of like when Dalglish went into Liverpool right after Hodgson. I know that Dalglish had won 3 European Cups with Liverpool as a manager, but it was 20 plus years before, and a lot had changed in football then. But he come in, he clearly was, out of his depth in terms of tactics and the way football is now and how players are these days. But just by having him in, the removal of Hodgson, I think they went from 12th and 4 points above the relegation zone to finishing 6th that season,
Well, really?
with him as caretaker manager. Yeah,
Didn't they go to the League Cup final that year too?
in his second season, they won the League Cup final and won the FA Cup. No, got to the FA Cup. They won the League Cup final and got to the FA Cup final. Lost to
They got
Chelsea.
drug bad.
They also finished 8th. Don't get me wrong. I'm like he didn't achieve great things, particularly in his second season once they made the move permanent. But clearly, just having that knowing of the club, the respect from the players, the feel good factor there, and the removal of Hodgson. Just enabled this, sort of revive of sorts and this bounce, and I think we would expect a similar sort of thing, right? But like you say, Ashwin, it is essentially a free hit. I feel like it's a very well thought out decision.
Yeah, and I think another aspect of this too, and it just goes back to contracts. Like, you need to make players happy. If they want to stay at your club, they have to feel happy. They have to feel part of it. And I think he coached or he managed Pogba at youth level, if I remember correctly.
So it was the reserves, right? But
Yeah.
the youth were bleeding into the reserves quite heavily. Yeah, so
Right, and I think that just bringing in, like, I not that he necessarily needs a new contract, but I do think that he was certainly, if they had kept Mourinho, and all the reports of, like, there have been all these reports constantly about, oh, Martial's so close to signing his contract, De Gea's so close to signing a contract, but then all the caveat is always like, but they want to wait until Mourinho is gone. They won't sign anything until they know what's going on at the club long term. And it's so obvious that it's about Mourinho. So, if maybe they still don't sign it because they want to wait to see who the permanent appointment is. But I do think that it makes you as a player more comfortable and about, just where the club is headed when you kind of feel that, okay, they are taking how we feel as players into
Yeah.
consideration.
Well,
And
Can,
and
can I
then,
just stop you for a moment?
yeah.
From now on, the M word is banned. No
Oh.
more. Sorry, now
So
carry on.
one thing that Jose was great at was
Oh.
no, no, you're right, Ushman, because you can only take so much of that toxicity, and by the time that hopefully Pochettino or whoever comes in the summer, Pogba may have already been at the point where he's like, look, I'm done, I can't take it here anymore. The fans are completely against me. I've had a terrible time. I want to move on, and my mind's made up. And to be honest, like there'll be fans out there who say, "Well, good fucking riddance, that's fine." And I don't subscribe to that view. I do subscribe that he could have done more himself, and that he needs to take some responsibility and accountability. But I do place most of the blame on Jose. But I think you're right. Just having him gone, just that as a default will help a lot. And I think Ollie, will essentially spend the next 6 months, if nothing else, like whatever's happening, whether it's working or it's not working, he will be reminding players what it means to play for United and what the
Absolutely.
expectations of playing at this club are, and he'll be drilling that into them. And if ultimately at the end of that Pogba still wants to leave, then that's fine, that's not a problem. But I still think that that's a strong message to be having. So I'm really looking forward to it. You see these people who are saying, we were talking about his experience and what he's done in the game. And it's like, look, he's the caretaker manager. He's not here to win the league. He's not even necessarily here to get us fourth. He's here to bring a good feel factor. He's here to align everyone together. And I think ultimately it's good that the club are saying we're not going to bring in a manager just because they're available right now. We're not going to keep Jose
I
till the
think
end of
so.
the season because the manager we want isn't available, like they might have done with Van Gaal. But also, if we're getting rid of Mourinho, sorry, Ed, if we're getting rid of him, we're not going to replace him with Zidane or Jardim because they're there at the moment. We're going to take time, we're going to refresh, we're going to have a think about, we're going to do this properly. And hopefully that gives them time to think, well, maybe let's bring in some sort of structure. Let's bring in a director of football. Let's start planning for who this person is going to be. Get that director of football involved in picking who the next manager is, because that's very important. It doesn't make sense to bring in a manager first and a director of football second. It makes sense to do the director of football first. So yeah, if we can follow this plan through to succession, then I think there are positive signs there, if nothing else.
So, just to go back to Ollie and expectations for this season, do you think it is absolutely a free hit? Would you like him to at least win the FA Cup, say? I mean, obviously you'd like him to, but would you expect him to get to at least the semis?
No, I don't. I don't really expect anything. Like I do think I think there'll be a bounce from the players. But I remember people thought this when Dalglish did come into Liverpool, and I think they lost their first game to us in the FA Cup 1-0, and then their first league game as well. And ultimately, it's hard for us to know whether, just by Ollie being there, Mourinho, not suddenly the players turn it on. We see this with Leicester and Chelsea quite often, where they're able to just turn it on and off depending on whether they're happy with the manager. And I think a lot of fans would find that quite frustrating. If we beat Cardiff 5-0 on Saturday, and Pogba puts in a blinder and gets a hat trick, yeah, there'll be people who are ecstatic and are saying Ollie should get the full-time job, but there'll also be people calling Pogba a snake and asking why he hasn't been putting in these performances for the last few months. So it's hard to know if that's the case, or if we'll come to Saturday's game, we'll actually see that the players' confidence shot, and because Mourinho hasn't worked on autonomy with them in terms of on the ball possession, where they have scenarios and plays which they play if the circumstances and the scenario allows for it. Yeah, exactly. If there isn't that there, which I don't think there is with Mourinho, and that's been one of our problems, then maybe that's not just something that you can necessarily turn on and off. But what I would say is that where we've played best under Mourinho is where the sails are up, we're playing in the wind, and we basically said, right, we're 2-0 down, we need to fucking get a move on and go all out and throw the kitchen sink at the opposition, like Newcastle game and comebacks like that. That's when we've been best, where tactics are thrown out the window and it's a bit more gung-ho. So it's whether Ollie can instill that instinctive attacking sort of attitude, and that's enough to pull us out of this slump, or whether it'll take a bit longer. It's hard to know. But so yeah, I don't have any expectations in all honesty.
My only expectations are, for not even how they. I think you're going to see a lot more of the creative players. I think Herrera, Fred, and Pereira will feature a lot more in midfield. I think you'll see a lot less of Matic and Fellaini. I think that I would be interested to see how Sanchez plays when he comes back, because I do think that I could see. I feel like it's more likely for me to see like Solskjaer using him as a striker or center forward than Mourinho was ever likely to do at full strength. And like there's more combinations and that we just never really tried with Mourinho, or didn't really give a fit. Like if it was we try for one match and then it's like, well, we didn't score 3 goals, so let's go back to Lukaku, like lumping up the ball to Lukaku up top, no matter what form he's in. I think that he will give players that haven't gotten a chance, and that like I think Dalot will probably play a lot for the rest of the way. I'll be shocked if he's not nailed on starter for most of the rest of the season. Even if he's struggling, I just can't see Solskjaer being like, no, we got to play Valencia, because I just can't see that.
I think I read somewhere that the average age of his team in Norway is 22 or 22 and a half or something. I think that's actually been a criticism of him in his second period at Molde, that he's played too young players at times and has put too much faith in them. So yeah, I definitely think we'll be seeing a lot of Dalot this season.
He's going to give Greenwood a debut.
I think that was one of his criticisms at Cardiff as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cardiff's such a strange one in that people point to the poor job he did at Cardiff as some, like, it's, for me, it's just got no relevance or merit, because
I agree.
I mean, Klopp took a team down, Conte took a team down, and then not long later Juventus signed him because he was a former player and they felt that he could do something, and he won the title with them, or multiple titles with them. And I'm not saying that Solskjaer would do that for us. I'm not saying that I'm just saying that it's just such a different job. I think after the Cardiff job, he said, right, that he's only ever been at United as a player, pretty much. The majority of his career was at United as a player, and then the United reserves, and then at Molde as a manager. And he said, I'm used to dominating every game. I'm used to having all the ball and being able to play attacking, entertaining football. And that's always been my mantra. And then he's at Cardiff, and they're in the Premier League, where they're on a shoestring budget. They've probably had the worst squad in the league on paper. They're in a difficult position in terms of the ownership and where the fans were, and what had gone on previously, and he didn't know how to cope with that. And that's fair enough. It's of very little relevance and as to what he needs to do with United. I think, in all honesty, I don't really care what he does with individuals. I don't really care who plays. I think most United fans just want to see us go out and try and put the effort in, and ideally play attacking football. I think it'll be a mixture of 4-3-3, 4-2-2, or 4-2-3-1, whatever it needs to be. But I don't think that's particularly important. It'll be that there's an assumption that United are going to go for it, and I think that's what's needed right now.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, because it is somewhat of a free hit, we can kind of get away with doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited for him to give like Greenwood a debut. I think that'll definitely happen at some point. I expect him to I think you'll just see a lot of, even if they're not like, they don't need to be, he started like full on debuts, but just cameos here and there. I think that will be a nice touch that Mourinho he just lacked. Like, there are so many small ways to win credit, not even credit, but like get supporters on your side. And it's like, especially at United, so much of that is just giving young players like a little bit of a run out. I remember Ferguson would like give whoever a run out for 10 minutes and you wouldn't see him for 2 months. But not that Ferguson even needed to buy himself credit towards the end, but that was kind of became like, a thing that just was part of United. And I am kind of excited just to see that come back, and I expect it will come back under Solskjaer.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Like, if anyone gets it, he gets it. You know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of United fans have been listening back to old interviews he's done and things like that. Like, he absolutely adores the club. He's always thought of Old Trafford and Manchester United as home. And you know, this isn't deja vu to Paul Pogba interviews once he's already back. This is, you know, Solskjaer 2 years ago whilst managing in Norway and you know, not being at the club, he's always said that, you know, it would be an ambition and a desire and a love to be back at United, and I believe I read somewhere that his contract had some sort of clauses around that too. No idea if that's true or not. He gets it, but also Phelan does. Phelan was at the club in various different roles for, I don't know, 15 years or something, right? And obviously played at the club as well. So between them, they know the club, they know the culture, they know the characteristics and the qualities of what United need to be, and that's what they'll be drilling down into. And like we said, the spec of this role isn't for them to achieve any real success, and it's not for them to necessarily set us up for long term by bringing in any sort of style. It's just to bring back some of that feel good factor and some of the, you know, the quality that has been lost over the last 5 years or so. So yeah, I think they're the right choices for that job. The choice for the long term, like I can't see beyond Pochettino, and it sounds like the board have a similar opinion from what seems to be briefings to the press.
Yeah, well, I mean, bringing in a caretaker manager does, like you said earlier, allow us to bring in that structure around the manager to enable them excel. I believe at the moment the rumour going around is that we're targeting that Paul Mitchell, who used to be the director of football at Southampton. He's currently at RB. Is it RB Leipzig or RB?
Yeah, who you know had like they finished second, was it, to last year or the season before, and obviously Naby Keita and a few other players have gone from there. Yeah,
they're still in fourth right now.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
and so, you know, if that's sort of the plan, it's very much like City did with I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the Barcelona chap and
Sure.
Pep Guardiola. Because you could blatantly see City over the years planning to get Pep Guardiola in.
Yeah.
They bought the players, they brought in the structure, everything that they needed to attract him, more than just money. And, you know, not rightly or wrongly, but, you know, say what you like about them, but at least they had a plan, so to speak. So if the Mourinho episode is something, oh God, I've broken my own rule there.
rules are meant to be broken.
Yeah, is something that, if that's his legacy, then it's not a bad legacy. It's sort of the thing that everyone said about Van Gaal when he came in. Oh, he lays the groundwork. It would be Jose's foundation that he has laid. You know,
are you going to start the thread?
Am I going to start that? No, I don't do that sort of stuff anymore. No, if it's not Pochettino and Solskjaer does a Di Matteo and wins the Champions League for us, would you want Solskjaer to stay?
No.
No?
No, because it would be exactly the same as Di Matteo. It would be
exactly.
It would be a perfect storm of circumstances, and it doesn't necessarily mean he's the right man to build the club. And also, I mean, let's be honest, it's not going to happen. But yeah,
No, it's not.
It's a completely, like I said, the job for right now, I think he's perfect. The job for the long term, there needs to be like we said, there needs to be two things. There needs to be a vision and a much more overarching structure at the club that allows for essentially consistent values and virtues to be ever present and evergreen, whoever the manager is, and to have a profile of player and system that we ought to be looking at, to make sure that as we're swapping between managers, we're not lurching between different play styles and spending hundreds of millions on players who the next manager isn't going to be a fan of, and then having to retrain them into something they're not, to fit square pegs into round holes, or ultimately do what Mourinho's done and ditch those players and spend another 300 million on getting new players in. Again, and trusting the manager with that money. It's or trusting Ed Woodward with that money and going for names, because ultimately it's, someone said to me at work the other day, oh, well, if Pochettino comes, do you think he'd bring Kane with him? I've always thought Kane could end up United. I'm just thinking, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm not. It doesn't interest me. I'm at a point now where once Ferguson left, I remember a lot of opposition fans didn't rate a lot of United players under Ferguson, and I just never understood it. I was like, "Look, we've just won the league by 13 points. How can you not rate these players?" And after him leaving, and then when you look at what we said recently about Juventus, when you look at that Liverpool team who beat us on Sunday, you look at these teams and you think, when those players were available,
we wouldn't have wanted
United
them.
fans didn't want them.
No.
They didn't want Mane. They didn't want Salah. They didn't.
I wanted Mane.
They definitely didn't. Sure, occasionally there'll be some who people want, but for the most part,
I wouldn't have touched Salah with a barge pole.
People weren't particularly interested or impressed, and we're also talking about people like Andy Robertson, pulling Joe Gomez up from the academy and Trent Arnold and stuff like. It's no longer about player names, and as much as this should be footballing basics, and I know I'm saying something that should be obvious, and I don't mean to be, it just feels like too often it's about, right, who's the best player in this position, let's get him, and there's no rhyme or reason to whether they're going to fit. What's important is we have a system and a style and an approach, and when the manager comes in, it's like, right, okay, what player do we need for this position? How do they complement the other players around them? Is there going to be chemistry there? What are they bringing to the table? And what shortfalls do they have that need covering elsewhere? And it shouldn't be this player's available and City want him, so let's get him. This player's got a lot of buying power, so let's buy him. Sanchez, for example, even though we've already got two people for the left wing and no one for the right, let's buy this player because of the money that they're going to bring in, because they'll bring the Japanese market. All of that is complete bollocks. We need to move away from that.
I'd hazard to say it's never been about player names. I mean, if you look at Ferguson's teams, Gary Neville, is he one of the best right backs ever in the world? No, I wouldn't say so. Did he try really hard and put the effort in? Yes.
Do you mean talent wise?
Talent wise, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, he was one of the best right backs in the world.
I wouldn't say ever. No.
Oh, maybe not ever. No,
I think even by his own admission, he probably wasn't one of the best.
Not ever, but like at the time, I think he was.
And then, well, I'm not sure I agree, but you've got players like Vidic turned into a great defender, but was he one of the best? What my argument is.
I don't know. Yeah, sure. No, I completely agree. I'm just saying. What I'm saying is that that's only become clear to me, and I think a lot of United fans since Fergie left. Is what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think at the time we're necessarily aware of that.
No.
And I think what Klopp has done at Liverpool, what Guardiola's done at City, obviously spent a lot of money, but ultimately what Pochettino's done at Spurs with, a net spend of, I don't know what it is. It's very close to zero.
Anyway, you said 40 million, yes.
I said 40 million. I've heard someone else say it, and then I think Gary Neville said it was minus something. He's sold more than he's bought. So I've got no idea what it is, but I know it's a lot less than any other club. And again, I struggle to rate Liverpool and Spurs players on an individual level, because I think, are they as an individual in isolation that good, or is it that in that system, with those other players around them doing the role that they've been asked to do under that manager, and that manager just getting more out of them than what they are, and getting an extra 10% out of them, and that all the players, there's a greater than the sum of their parts sort of scenario, like what Fergie did. Because that's like United against Liverpool at the weekend just looked like 11 random players thrown onto the pitch who'd never met each other before, didn't know how each other played, didn't know what roles they were meant to be doing. It's and we need to we need to get past that. So I've got beyond the point of caring who starts, who plays, who we buy, who we bring in. I just want there to be a clear process and a clear set of thinking in mind that says, this is the sort of play we want. These are the qualities they need to have. This is the system that they'll be fitting into. This is the chemistry that they need to have with others, and this is what they're going to be bringing into the table. And it's about meeting that criteria. And we're some way away from that. But with a director of football, and then someone like Pochettino, who's been used to working under a director of football, we can definitely get there.
So I know your answer to this. It's Pochettino. Ashwin, who do you think the long-term manager should be?
I don't really. I mean, I would like Pochettino. He'd be in my if I had a top five, he'd be in my top five. I I don't have a strong enough preference because I think that if we've seen anything, it's with all the managers selected, it's that just having a profile and a name doesn't mean anything necessarily, and just being a preference for people doesn't mean anything. This is all I want to see. I want us to see us hire a director of football. I want to see him conduct an actual process of interviewing candidates and going through a genuine search of who even if Mitchell gets hired and he's dead set on Pochettino and they know they can get Pochettino, even if it's just for show, I would like to see them interview multiple candidates and just like he's talking about, have a process. Show me you have a process, and then I can take everything you're doing way more seriously, because it doesn't seem scatterbrained. It doesn't seem like you're just running to the store and grabbing something off a shelf that looks really good. You're actually sitting down, evaluating different candidates, and going. But if you, I mean, I would like Pochettino. I think Zidane is actually really underrated as a manager.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
I think that Lucien Favre from Dortmund would be good, but I don't know if he would come because I think he might have played at Dortmund, but he just got there too, so I'm not sure if that's even a candidate that would be available to us. I think that Fonseca at Shakhtar is a manager I've really liked from afar. Every time I've watched Shakhtar, I've been pretty impressed by how they play and how proactive they are. And maybe it's just having all the Brazilians that they have. They seem to play an exciting style of football that I like watching. Yeah, I mean those are just four off the top of my head that I wouldn't mind. But yeah, I think you're underselling Zidane, Ed.
I'm not sold on Zidane. I think if we appointed Zidane, he would. I know that's football now, but he would be a very short term manager. He'd win sort of what he wanted to, and then leave.
I mean, I would take that right now. No, but ultimately, I think what me and Ashwin are saying is that if you've got a director of football who has a process in picking the manager, and they're the ones who are picking the players and whatnot, then having a short-term manager is less of an issue, because ultimately that's the way football is now. I think we've got to be accepting of that, right? The getting the underlying structure to be consistent is how you avoid that creeping in and having any sort of drastic impact. Obviously, I know that Madrid has struggled this season, but ultimately, if they themselves need to work on their structure and get away from the politics and the way that players are picked there, typically by name. Like Zidane is obviously a risk because of the limited, capacity that he's had as a manager to date. But I'm with Ushwin in that ultimately the main thing is that there's a director of football and a style and a process, and that from there, moving between managers is less of a lurch between two distinct realms or alternatives, and becomes a much more successive thing that's conducive to success. That sounded like a lot of waffle.
I get why Pochettino would be the favorite and why a lot of people would like him.
I can't see beyond him. Like, to
Are
me,
you sure I'm for Pochettino as well?
to me, he's the well, I mean, the one black mark against his name for most people, right, is that he's never won anything. And to me, it's just a case of, look, he's at a club where there's no expectation to win, there's no know-how to win, but also they haven't spent the money both on transfers or on wages to win. Like, they still massively, for me, overachieved. And not only overachieved once like Leicester did, maybe not winning the league but coming second multiple times as he has done isn't as impressive as winning the league like Leicester. But ultimately, Leicester was a perfect storm of circumstances. It wasn't a fluke, but it was a one-off. Whereas he has made Tottenham into a consistently performing, drilled machine who are performing very, very well, who beat top teams, who consistently outperform and overachieve. And like, like for me, if he was in a structure and if he was spending the money that we would allow him for, then I think success would come.
Yeah, one thing I would really like to see, I know you just touched on it, not having a trophy. If he wins the league, I know it's just the League Cup, but if they turned over Arsenal today at the Emirates. They have Chelsea now in the semis, so that'll be a 2-leg tie. And then they'll probably have to play City in the final. So that's as strong a run as you could possibly have in a League Cup. And because it's a London derby, and because it would be a Big Six match, and it's a cup final. So these are matches that are going to be taken seriously, I think, by the managers. Yeah. So if he wins this, I think it would say something about, like, not that winning one cup means that okay, now he's 100% ready for United, but it would kind of take that monkey, whatever, that monkey off his shoulders of you have that pressure off of you now, and it's like that argument can't be levied at him, and the opponents he would have had to face along the way to win that cup do say something.
Yeah, that's fair.
Let's do it. Let's sign him. What's stopping us, right? Only Daniel Levy. Yeah, I think to be honest, it's not only can I not see past him, but I think it's quite clear that he seems to be the outstanding candidate who's available in terms of qualities and characteristics and knowing of the Premier League and playing of youth and whatnot. But ultimately, the briefings from Woodward clearly seem to be pointing in his direction. I know that we don't know that they're briefings. We know that they don't necessarily directly come from Woodward, but it looks to be the case that the club are actively going to go for him, and that's what we're going to set out to do. And I think that's the right decision. But I agree with Ashwin that it would be good that in between now and then we're getting a director of football and it's taken as a very serious process, because I do believe that the next manager is incredibly important, because we've already gone 5 or 6 years now since winning a league. It can very quickly become a decade, and that decade can very quickly become 2 decades.
Yeah.
And there's only so long that we can just churn through managers and players and spend at the rate that we're spending and not see results from it, because things are only going to get harder. Things aren't going to get easier the longer that we don't win something. So I think the next manager is incredibly important, and we've got to get it right, and we've got to take it very, very seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, if they think it's Poch, I kind of agree. I think Poch is a pretty obvious, at least you would say he's one of the favorites, if not the favorite. If you can get him right, I'm sure that you back channel and you kind of see what's going on and everything, but if you think you can get him, I think, and obviously it's still, you want to get the structure in place. Still, I would like to see interviews done, blah blah blah. But if you can get him, I do think that he is a manager that you should get. And not only the thing about him is he's the type of manager that if he comes to United, I don't think he would leave United. I think that he would basically be there because he had a shot to go to Madrid basically last summer if he wanted to, I think. And he essentially, was not really that interested, or at least didn't make that choice. So if United has the clout to pull him from a situation that is, I would say at this current point in time, inarguably better than where we are right now as a club, as a squad, as just a performing unit, they should definitely do it.
The position that he's in with Tottenham is more desirable than where United are at right now, but that's because of him. There's maybe more of a structure there than there is at United, but that structure is incredibly tight, and they don't play players what they need to keep hold of them. They don't pay players what they need to entice them to come forward, and they don't pay other clubs the transfer fees needed. He's moaned about that, right? He's spoken about that.
No, this is the ceiling for them. As long as City is there, and as long as, I don't think there's any chance. I really don't think there's a chance, barring 10 catastrophic injuries for City and Liverpool, that they could win a league in the foreseeable future.
But exactly, this is.
And I agree. When I said what I meant, still you still have to be able to make that argument to him, right? Hey, look, obviously what you're leaving.
He's an ambitious guy, right? He was doing incredibly well at Southampton. He went to Tottenham and he's done the same with them. And surely Tottenham was a stepping stone for him. He can go to, arguably the biggest club in the world in a league that he knows very well, and he'll be given the money that he needs
the second most
to go
resources
and succeed.
in the league.
And maybe he will be one of those managers where actually the money isn't necessarily a good thing, but if there's a director of football, then maybe that matters less. It'll be really interesting to see, and there's no guarantee of success, and if we don't get the structure right, then he still may be fighting a somewhat losing battle,
Right.
or a tidal wave of sorts. So he might have to push past that, but I think he's the best option.
Without the structure, I just don't think he would come. So it's very important that we get the structure in place. And I think if anything, the last 5-6 years have shown us that I think any manager that's coming to United now, if we don't change the structure, would be extremely wary of taking the job, regardless of how much money you have to spend and all this stuff. It's very obvious that without the proper structure in place, no matter how much money you spend, it's very difficult to win in such a competitive league now.
Yeah, well, I do think the realisation is that actually when they were replacing Fergie, they were replacing both a director of football and a manager, not just a manager.
Well, obviously David Gill left as well, so
yeah.
But too.
I think Fergie planned his squads. He had his 3-year cycle, and he sort of knew where he was going to each season as they came. I did want to mention on the Pochettino thing, though. I was doing a bit of prep today for this, and I noticed he was asked today about any January signings, and I didn't click the article, but his response was, "I've got no money. There won't be any January signings." Perhaps not put as bluntly as that, but it's something to watch, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I would like to know. I mean, I wouldn't care if they signed somebody in January, so long as it is. I think it's acceptable to buy a player if there's some vision for where, like buying
Ashwin, we're talking Spurs, not United.
I thought you were talking about United. Well, Spurs isn't going to be. They're not going to buy anybody. We know that.
United. I think United will buy. I'm expecting United to buy in January.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
I could see us buying a young player that's been there's been a lot of
talk of this Napoli.
Yeah, was it
27-year-old defender, right?
Milinkovic or something? Is that what his name?
Yeah. No, that's the midfielder. Kude. I can't remember his name.
Oh, Koulibaly.
There you go. He does look to be a very good player. In fairness, there's been talks a bit. We'll see. But I expect us to spend. But yeah, Ed's right that Pochettino isn't expecting Spurs to spend, and how is he meant to drive that team forward without further investment? And it'll probably come to a point where in the summer where there's a few more players like Walker and the likes and Danny Rose at one point and Eric Dyer, there'll be more players who are looking to leave this summer because they can go elsewhere and earn more money. So I think the guy's got ambition. He seems like a very astute and intelligent man. If he feels that the structure is in place at United to allow him to succeed, then I think he will be very, very, very tempted to come, and that's what we've got to hope for.
That and just like the willingness, because I do think that one issue that Mourinho ran into, and I think probably even Van Gaal, is there's at some point we just have to cut bait with some of these players and forget if we're getting good value, resale value, just get rid of some of these guys they're not good enough, right? Like there's so many players we talk about on every pod. Jones, not good enough. Rojo, not good enough. Darmian, not good enough. Valencia, not good enough.
I don't always think it's a unwillingness from the club. I think it's that we went and gave players far too much money on a weekly basis. And what's Rojo's incentive to leave when he can sit on the bench and earn ridiculous sums of money at United that no other team who would want him would match? I don't necessarily think that. Sometimes it'll be the transfer fees, but I think more often than not it's that no one's going to pay them the amount of money that they're getting paid at United, and they therefore see no reason to leave.
Well, no, because I think when we were initially trying to get rid of Nani, where did he go? Back to Sporting, didn't he?
We gave him an extension, though, didn't we?
On loan?
Yeah, it was a bit strange. It was part of the Rojo
deal, so right? we paid his wages while he was at Sporting, or at least half of his wages.
Yeah, that's what it was.
So, yeah, but
With Darmian, I know that we there was an offer to take him, but we wanted more money, and I did not understand that because he clearly wasn't in our plans as a club or really even Mourinho's plan at all. So I don't know. I think that we can keep talking about this, but I think we're all on the same page, more or less.
Shall we look ahead to the Cardiff game?
I've got nothing to say on it.
Nothing to say. Well,
it was what I was going to say before Mourinho got sacked was that's a terrible game because if we were to batter them 5-0, then it's their Cardiff, similar to their Fulham last week. But they will sit back. They will have no ambition. They can occasionally get results against big teams. There was every chance of us dropping points in that game, and obviously that would have been seen as a disaster. And yeah, but now we've got Solskjaer. It's his old club. He's going to be motivated. The players will hopefully be motivated. It's basically just going to be a case of, is the cloud being lifted, and therefore the players are able to switch it on, which is something that some people would feel somewhat strange about, or is it that there's still a deep-rooted problem within the players where they're not able to play on instinct, and their confidence has taken too much of a hit for just a swapping of manager to fix things. So we'll see, I guess. But I think the main thing will be that it will be a fairly attacking lineup and formation. 100% Pogba will be back in the team, like no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And he will be telling them to go for it.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what I expect and hope for, and we'll batter them 5-0.
Well, sure. We'll see. They're, like I said, it'll be 10 men behind the ball and whatnot. So it could be a 30 shots, no goals. It could be a 4-5-0. Who knows?
Yeah, just whip it into Lukaku. He'll create something for sure.
If he plays.
If he plays, true.
So, I guess, does anyone else have anything more to add? Are we happy with this so far?
Yeah.
We've rambled on a lot, I think, and
yeah.
Ashwin was very angry for a while.
Yes,
but I think we've waffled on enough and said everything that we wanted to say, just in probably a long-winded manner, as I'm doing right now. So yeah.
And probably numerous times, in fairness.
Yes, but it was, it's been coming, right? And this is more just. I mean, no one's going to listen to this or care about it. Right? This is more therapy for us. So.
Yeah, I mean, and if they do listen to it, it's just a bumper pod for them. Exactly. So there you go. So yeah, I guess that's good night from me.
Good night from me.
Good night from me.